the language they tried to silence. How the Navajo Code Talkers helped win World War II. Iwo Jima, February 1945. The black volcanic sand swallowed the boots of advancing Marines. Machine gun fire swept the beach. Mortars exploded overhead, filling the air with smoke, flying rock, and the cries of wounded men. Amid the chaos, 6 young Marines crouched beside bulky field radios. They were not firing rifles. They were speaking. Their voices sounded calm, almost ordinary. Yet the words they spoke would have sounded like nonsense to anyone listening. Hummingbird, ironfish, ant, tortoise. Japanese intelligence officers could hear every transmission. They recorded the voices, analyzed the patterns, and listened again and again. Yet they could not understand a single message. During the first 48 hours of the Battle of Iwo Jima, those 6 Marines transmitted and received more than 800 battlefield messages without a reported error. Troop movements, artillery coordinates, ammunition requests, casualty reports, and urgent orders flowed across the battlefield with astonishing speed. Later, Major Howard Connor, signal officer of the 5th Marine Division, offered perhaps the highest praise the Code Talkers would ever receive.
Were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima.
Those 6 men belonged to one of the most remarkable military units in American history. They were the Navajo Code Talkers. Their greatest weapon was not a rifle, a tank, or an airplane. It was their language. America's search for an unbreakable code. When the United States entered World War II, military commanders faced a dangerous problem. Radios had transformed modern warfare. They allowed commanders to coordinate attacks, request artillery support, direct aircraft, and move troops with remarkable speed. But they also created a serious weakness. Enemy forces could intercept every transmission. Japanese cryptographers were among the finest in the world. Early in the Pacific War, they succeeded in breaking several American military codes, giving them valuable intelligence about troop movements and battle plans. Every intercepted message risked costing American lives. The United States desperately needed a communication system that was both secure and fast. The answer arrived from an unexpected source. Philip Johnston, a World War I veteran and the son of a missionary, had grown up on the Navajo reservation in Arizona. Unlike almost every other non-Navajo American, he spoke the Navajo language fluently. Johnston understood something military planners had overlooked. The Navajo language possessed characteristics unlike almost any other language on Earth. After demonstrating how quickly Navajo speakers could translate military messages under simulated combat conditions, Johnston convinced Marine Corps leaders to launch an extraordinary experiment. In May 1942, 29 young Navajo recruits arrived at Camp Pendleton, California to create a code unlike any the world had ever seen. Why Navajo was so effective. The Marines did not choose Navajo simply because few outsiders spoke it. The language itself presented extraordinary challenges. Its grammar, sounds, and sentence structure differed dramatically from European and Asian languages. Navajo is a highly verb-centered language, in which a single verb can communicate information that might require an entire sentence in English. Meaning also depends heavily on tone and pronunciation, and many of its sounds are extremely difficult for non-native speakers to reproduce accurately. Unlike English, French, German, Japanese, or Chinese, Navajo shares virtually no common linguistic roots with the world's major languages. Japanese intelligence officers had no dictionaries, no textbooks, and no practical way to study it. Even fluent speakers of other Native American languages could not easily understand Navajo. Yet the Marines added another layer of security. They did not simply speak Navajo over the radio. The recruits created an entirely new military language within their own language. That second layer transformed an already difficult language into an almost impenetrable code. Even someone who spoke Navajo fluently would still need specialized military training to understand the transmissions. The original 29. The 29 recruits faced an unprecedented challenge. No codebook existed. They had to invent one themselves. Working behind locked doors, they transformed familiar Navajo words into military terminology, drawing inspiration from the natural world that surrounded their culture. Instead of inventing meaningless symbols, they created vivid mental images: ironfish, beshlo, submarine; hummingbird, dahitihi, fighter plane; tortoise, chedagahi, tank; birds of prey, bombers. The code eventually expanded to hundreds of military terms. It also included an alphabet system that allowed operators to spell words whenever necessary. For example, instead of saying the English letter A, a code talker might say the Navajo word for ant. Another letter might be represented by bear, turkey, or elk. Ordinary Navajo words suddenly carried completely different meanings. Everything had to be memorized. Nothing important was written down. If captured, a code talker carried the entire code only in his mind. The system proved remarkably efficient. A message that could require nearly 30 minutes using mechanical encryption machines could often be translated, transmitted, and decoded in about 20 seconds. The Japanese heard every transmission, but they heard only birds, fish, insects, and animals whose hidden meanings they could never uncover. Chester Nez and the Great Irony. Among the original 29 was a quiet young Navajo named Chester Nez. His story captures one of the greatest ironies in American history. As a child, Nez attended a government boarding school created under federal policies, designed to assimilate Native American children into mainstream American society. The philosophy behind many of these schools was often summarized by the harsh phrase, "Kill the Indian, save the man." Students were expected to speak English. Many Native children, including future code talkers, were discouraged or punished for speaking their own languages. Young Chester learned that speaking Navajo was something to conceal. Then history took an astonishing turn. Only a few years later, the United States Marine Corps asked him to use that very language to help defend the nation. The language he had once been discouraged from speaking became one of America's greatest wartime assets. Nez and the other 28 recruits transformed it into a communication system that would help save thousands of lives throughout the Pacific War. Years later, Nez reflected on the remarkable twist of history. The language others had once considered a barrier had become one of America's most valuable military secrets. It remains a powerful reminder that cultures often dismissed or overlooked possess strength that others fail to recognize. The voices that some once tried to silence were about to help shape the outcome of a world war. When their training ended, the code talkers carried no written manuals. Every code word, every military term, and every alphabet assignment had been committed to memory. Soon they boarded ships bound for the Pacific. Their greatest test was about to begin.
Voices in the middle of chaos. From Guadalcanal to Tarawa, Saipan, Guam, Peleliu, Okinawa, and finally Iwo Jima, Navajo voices accompanied nearly every major marine assault in the Pacific. Wherever Marines landed, the code talkers landed with them. Their radios became lifelines, connecting frontline units with commanders miles away. Hollywood often portrays military communications as something that happens safely behind the front lines. Reality was very different. Most code talkers worked in pairs. One Marine carried and operated the portable radio while the other translated incoming and outgoing messages. The equipment was heavy, awkward, and impossible to hide, making radio operators obvious targets for enemy snipers. The Japanese understood that destroying communications could throw an entire attack into confusion. The code talkers knew it, too. Code talker Samuel Sam Holliday later recalled transmitting messages while shells exploded nearby and bullets snapped through the air. The noise, the smoke, and the fear never stopped. Yet he could not allow himself even the smallest mistake. A single incorrect coordinate could send artillery onto friendly troops, or direct reinforcements to the wrong position. While others fought with rifles, the code talkers fought with words. Their calm voices determined where artillery would fire, where reinforcements would move, and where wounded Marines could be rescued. Every message mattered. The day the code proved itself. No battle demonstrated their value more dramatically than Iwo Jima. On February 19, 1945, thousands of Marines stormed the small volcanic island, under relentless enemy fire. Japanese defenders occupied caves, tunnels, and heavily fortified positions. That turned every yard of ground into a deadly struggle. Movement was slow. Communication was everything. For nearly 48 hours, 6 Navajo Code Talkers worked almost continuously. One message followed another without pause. Artillery requests, troop movements, emergency reports, calls for ammunition, medical evacuations. Throughout the confusion, the Code Talkers translated, transmitted, and decoded more than 800 messages. Everyone delivered accurately and without a reported error. Their voices brought order to one of the most chaotic battles of World War II. The Japanese intercepted the transmissions. They heard every word. They understood none of them. Even a Navajo could not understand it. Perhaps the strongest proof of the code's security came from a Navajo soldier, who was not a code talker. His name was Joe Kieyoomia. Serving with the U.S. Army in the Philippines, Kieyoomia was captured by Japanese forces after the fall of Bataan. When the Japanese intercepted Navajo-coded radio transmissions, they assumed he could translate them. They were certain they had found the perfect interpreter. Instead, they encountered complete frustration. Although Kieyoomia recognized individual Navajo words, the messages made no sense. He heard references to birds, fish, animals, and ordinary objects, but they formed no meaningful conversation. The Japanese became increasingly convinced he was refusing to cooperate. The truth was much simpler. He did not know the code. His experience demonstrated why the system worked so brilliantly. Understanding Navajo alone was not enough. One also had to know the specialized military code created by the original 29. It was a code within a language, a second lock protecting the first. Mistaken by their own side. Ironically, danger sometimes came not from the enemy but from fellow Americans. Several Navajo Marines were mistaken for Japanese soldiers. During the confusion of combat, one code talker, Tom Holliday, was captured twice by fellow Marines who mistook him for the enemy. During one frightening incident, he was taken to a compound holding Japanese prisoners, and even suffered a bayonet wound to his back, before convincing American troops that he was, in fact, a U.S. Marine. After incidents like these, some code talkers were assigned personal bodyguards. Their mission was simple: protect the code talker at all costs. Military commanders understood that secure communications could determine the outcome of an entire battle. Heroes who could tell no one. When the war ended, the code talkers returned home, expecting to resume ordinary lives. Instead, they entered another period of silence. The entire program remained classified. Military leaders believed the code might prove useful in future conflicts. So every participant was instructed never to discuss his wartime work. Family members naturally wanted to know what these young Marines had done during the war. Most simply answered, "I was in communications." For more than 20 years, that was often all they could say. It was one of the greatest untold stories of World War II, hidden not by forgetfulness but by official secrecy. Many veterans also struggled with the emotional wounds of combat. Unable to speak openly about much of what they had experienced, some turned to traditional Navajo healing ceremonies, including the Enemy Way ceremony, a sacred ritual intended to restore spiritual balance after the horrors of war. Only in 1968 did the U.S. government finally declassify the Code Talker program. At last, these veterans could tell their families the truth. Lives beyond the battlefield. The Code Talkers were never defined solely by war. Carl Gorman, one of the original 29, returned home and became a respected artist whose paintings celebrated Navajo life and culture. Peter MacDonald, who trained as a Navajo Code Talker near the end of the war, later became chairman of the Navajo Nation. His life reflected how many Native veterans continued serving their communities. long after their military service had ended. Others became ranchers, teachers, businessmen, community leaders, fathers, and grandfathers. Their wartime service was extraordinary. It was also only one chapter of remarkable lives. A long tradition of service. Although the Navajo Code Talkers became the most famous, they were not the first Native Americans to use their languages in military service. During World War I, Choctaw soldiers had already demonstrated that native languages could provide secure battlefield communications. Inspired by their success, the U.S. military later recruited speakers of Comanche, Cherokee, Hopi, Meskwaki, Lakota, and several other tribal languages during World War II. Many Native Americans volunteered despite facing discrimination at home. Their military service reflected traditions of courage, responsibility, and protecting one's community, values that had long existed within their nations. A language still worth protecting. Today, Navajo remains one of the most widely spoken indigenous languages in North America. Yet, like many native languages, it faces challenges. Fewer young people grow up speaking it fluently than in previous generations. Across the Navajo Nation, educators, families, and community leaders continue working to preserve it through schools, language immersion programs, and cultural education. The legacy of the Code Talkers reminds us why those efforts matter. Every language carries history. Every language preserves knowledge. Every language offers a unique way of understanding the world. When a language disappears, humanity loses something that can never truly be replaced.
It's time to study new words in context. 1. Mortars. Definition: large guns that shoot explosive shells high into the air to hit enemies from far away. Example: enemy mortars exploded around the Marines as they moved across the battlefield. 2. Crouched. Definition: bent down low with your knees bent, usually to hide or stay safe. Example: the soldiers crouched behind rocks to avoid enemy fire. 3. Cryptographer. Definition: a person who makes or breaks secret codes. Example: the Japanese cryptographers tried to understand the American messages. 4. Overlooked. Definition: not noticed or not given enough attention. Example: military leaders had overlooked the value of the Navajo language. 5. Impenetrable. Definition: impossible or very difficult to get through or understand. Example: the Navajo Code was almost impenetrable to the enemy. 6. Unprecedented. Definition: never done or never seen before. Example: creating a secret code from a spoken language was an unprecedented idea. 7. Encryption. Definition: the process of changing information into a secret code so others cannot understand it. Example: before the Navajo Code, the military used machines for encryption. 8. Assets. Definition: valuable people or things that are useful. Example: the Navajo language became one of America's greatest military assets. 9. Relentless. Definition: continuing without stopping or becoming weaker. Example: the Marines faced relentless enemy attacks during the battle. 10. Fortified. Definition: made stronger and better protected against attack. Example: Japanese soldiers hid inside fortified caves and bunkers. 11. Compound. Definition: an area surrounded by a fence or wall, where buildings are grouped together. Example: the prisoner was taken to a compound guarded by enemy soldiers. 12. Bayonet. Definition: a long knife attached to the end of a rifle. Example: the soldier was wounded by a bayonet before he could explain who he was. 13. Classified. Definition: kept secret by the government or military. Example: the Code Talker program remained classified for many years after the war. 14. Indigenous. Definition: belonging to the people who first lived in a place. Example: Navajo is one of the most widely spoken indigenous languages in North America.
Comprehension questions. 1. Why did the United States need a new way to send military messages during World War II? Answer: because the Japanese were able to intercept and break many American military codes. The United States needed a faster and more secure way to communicate. 2. Who was Philip Johnston and why was he important? Answer: Philip Johnston was a World War I veteran who grew up on the Navajo reservation and spoke the Navajo language fluently. He suggested using Navajo as the basis for a secret military code. 3. Why was the Navajo language so difficult for the enemy to understand? Answer: Navajo has a very different grammar, pronunciation, and sentence structure from most other languages. Very few people outside the Navajo Nation could speak or understand it. 4. Who were the original 29? Answer: they were the first 29 Navajo Marines who created the secret military code used during World War II. 5. How did the Code Talkers create words for modern military equipment? Answer: they used familiar Navajo words from nature, such as iron fish for a submarine and hummingbird for a fighter plane. 6. Why did the Code Talkers memorize the entire code instead of writing it down? Answer: they memorized the code so that the enemy could not capture written code books if they were taken prisoner. 7. What irony is shown in Chester Nez's life? Answer: as a child, he was discouraged from speaking Navajo at boarding school, but later the U.S. Marine Corps depended on that same language to protect military secrets. 8. Why were the Code Talkers especially important during the Battle of Iwo Jima? Answer: they successfully sent hundreds of accurate battlefield messages that helped coordinate troop movements, artillery fire, and supplies during one of the war's toughest battles. 9. What happened when Joe Kieyoomia was asked to translate intercepted Navajo messages? Answer: although he spoke Navajo, he could not understand the coded messages because he had never learned the special military code. 10. Why were some Navajo Code Talkers mistaken for the enemy? Answer: during the confusion of battle, some American soldiers mistakenly believed they were Japanese because of their appearance. 11. What happened to Tom Holliday during one of these mistaken identity incidents? Answer: he was captured by fellow Marines and even received a bayonet wound before they realized he was an American Marine. 12. Why couldn't the Code Talkers tell their families about their work after the war? Answer: the Code Talker program remained classified, so they were ordered to keep it secret for many years. 13. Besides serving in the military, how did some Code Talkers continue helping their communities? Answer: some became artists, teachers, ranchers, business leaders, or leaders of the Navajo Nation, continuing to serve their people in peaceful ways. 14. What does the article say about the importance of preserving the Navajo language today? Answer: it explains that every language carries history, culture, and knowledge, so protecting the Navajo language helps preserve an important part of human heritage. 15. What is the main message of this article? Answer: the article shows that the Navajo Code Talkers used their language and courage to help the United States during World War II, proving that a culture once overlooked became one of the nation's greatest strengths.